Hi, Denver Startup Week. I'm Ben Data, one of the co-chairs of DSW. Denver Startup Week is the largest free entrepreneurial event in the world, and it's only possible thanks to the support of our sponsors. We have nearly 50 sponsor companies who contribute to make DSW possible. Let's show our love for these companies today and all week long. Thanks to our HQ and title sponsor, Amazon, and our title sponsors, whose leadership makes this week come to life. Capital One Cafe, Downtown Denver Partnership, Fluid Truck, Hotel Engine, and WeWork. And our track sponsors who have made all the great content you're hearing today possible. Founder Track sponsor, Kickstart. Growth Track sponsor, Friday Health Plans. Developer Track sponsor, Quizlet. Product Track sponsor, Palantir. Design Track sponsor, Battery 621 and the Public Works. People Track sponsor, Exactly. And Spotlight event sponsor, Strat Labs. Our headline event sponsors are bringing the excitement this week. Thank you to B-Side Fun, Colorado Public Radio, Comcast, Coors Brewing Company, Denver Pavilions, Entrepreneurship at the University of Denver, Gusto, JP Morgan Chase, Method, Moss Adams, Pi Insurance, Promontory Mortgage Path, Red Bull Basement, Southwest, Tattered Cover, and VF Venture Foundry. Finally, thank you to our partner sponsors and member sponsors listed on the screen. Thank you for your support of Denver Startup Week. Now, let's get to it.
Only 6% of U.S. retail businesses have a Black owner. That needs to change. So I did something. I created a Black Business Accelerator at Amazon. And now we have a program that's dedicated to making tomorrow a better day for Black businesses.
This is really good quality.
I am Tiffany, and this is just the beginning.
Hi everyone, welcome to Denver Startup Week. I'm Diane Miles, the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Co-Chair and member of the Denver Startup Week Organizing Committee. As a committee, we acknowledge Indigenous people as the original owners of the land on which we reside, which is the traditional territory of the Ute, Cheyenne, and Arapaho peoples. We acknowledge the painful history of genocide, ethnic cleansing, forced removal, stolen land, and forced occupation of their territory. And we honor those who have stewarded this land throughout generations and all other Indigenous tribes and nations who call Colorado home. Thank you for joining us for the 10th anniversary of Denver Startup Week. At Denver Startup Week, we strive to make all of our sessions a space where attendees can connect, learn, and grow, regardless of age, gender identity, gender expression, race, ability, sexual orientation, or a combination of those identities. There is something for everyone at Denver Startup Week. Thanks to all of our community members who submitted their best content to make this week what it is. Thank you to our sponsors for their support in helping us to keep DSW free and accessible for all. With that, please enjoy this session and the entire week.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Amazon headquarters of Denver Startup Week. We're excited to have a really special guest here today. And we're going to kick it off with hearing from a leader that we're very fortunate to have in our community. My name's Tami Door. I'm the CEO of the Downtown Denver Partnership, but I'm also the co-chair and co-founder of Denver Startup Week. We're thrilled to be celebrating our 10-year anniversary, much in thanks to all of our incredible sponsors and partners. So thanks for joining us. I am excited to introduce you to Eric Roza, and Eric knows this. I tell people all the time, Eric, I think you are one of the strongest business leaders in our community and an individual that has consistently really earned the respect of your teams, built incredible teams, obviously built an incredible company, and now on to something new. As CEO and owner of CrossFit, I know there's a bright future in this new role, but I thought it would be great to kick off and have you talk a little bit about your journey with Datalogics and how that then brought you to CrossFit. So let's start there.
Absolutely. Well, it's great to be with you, Tami. I think you're another amazing pillar of leadership in the community. So thanks for everything you do, and congrats on the 10-year anniversary.
Thank you.
Well, I met a small company in Colorado called Next Action when I moved here in early 2007. And Next Action was based in Westminster and then in Broomfield. And they had built a pretty interesting business helping catalog companies kind of retailers target their catalogs. And they, at the time, they were, believe it or not, this is a sign of the times, it was 2007. They were one of the hotter companies in Colorado, but they'd hit an impasse in their growth. And so they were looking for someone new to come in. And I came in initially as COO as I moved here and then became CEO. And when I became CEO, we brought in a new lead investor, General Catalyst, and rebranded the company as Datalogics. And so a lot of people ask me, what was it like to start Datalogics? Well, the start of Datalogics was actually had its roots in this company, Next Action, which was a catalog company. And we then became a digital data and analytics company. So that was kind of the initiation of the story. Started in 2007. By 2009, we were starting to build out our digital products. And I think of that as kind of the first chapter, very much scrappy, about 100 people. We had revenue, but the revenue was almost all offline, not digital revenue. So it wasn't deemed very valuable, I think, to investors at the time. As we progressed, we became known for people who knew what we strove to be known for initially was the people who knew more about consumer purchasing than any other company in the world. So if you wanted to target an audience online and you wanted them to actually buy things in stores, which is where almost everything was sold at that point, about 95% of commerce was happening offline. Then if you wanted to know about that, we were the guys to come to. We not only had this incredibly rich database of consumer purchasing behavior, but we had connected that database to all these cookies. And so you could say, I want to find people who have cars that are more than 5 years old and prefer Asian imports, as an example, rather than just buying a certain publisher's website for 10 times that amount. You get a much better audience. And so that was kind of the genesis of the idea. I consider that kind of chapters 1 and 2. There was the Next Action kind of chapter of catalog marketing. Then there was the step 1 of the cookie world of targeting with data. I'll pause there if you have any questions, and I can go to the next 2 chapters. But
well, no, I think that really sets the stage well in terms of those first entrees into the company. Yeah, keep rolling.
Yeah. So the first one was kind of the turnaround phase. The second one was kind of a rapid growth phase, but kind of fumbling around a little bit. This Facebook thing was seeming like something that might become important at some point. They were, these are early days, but there was no Instagram yet, and Facebook was starting to just become a juggernaut, but they were living really outside of the cookie world. And so we kept reaching out to them and saying, hey, we have all this rich data that you could start targeting with. And you don't have to guess based on what people are saying on Facebook. We know what people have bought and what cars they own and what groceries they're buying and so on. And so you could use that data on Facebook. And they kind of would listen to us and then say, we don't need you. We've got all the data in the world. And then a year later, we tried again. They said, we still don't need you. They spent a little more time. They said, we still don't need you. And then I read something about a new ad platform they were launching. And I'll always remember this. I'm in the air and I text Sheryl Sandberg and the head of analytics, who was the guy who had shot us down twice at Facebook. And I said, hey, I read about your new self-serve advertising platform. We've just signed a big partnership with Visa. What if we could let merchants use their own Visa data? Because merchants don't know who's actually bought from them, right? Even when it happens in a store, they have no idea, right? Unless they have a loyalty program. We could actually use the actual Visa data and help them target their own customers and build lookalikes and all this great stuff. And by the way, that service still has never happened, the one I pitched to them. And I was in the air and I sent it. And it went through, I got a bar from it. It went through. And by the time I landed, there was a response back from a guy named Brad Smallwood, the head of analytics, who said, we're not interested in that. Sorry. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm never going to get into these guys. This was the 3rd attempt. He said, what we really need is someone to measure whether our ads are having an impact in the store for the big consumer products retailers, for the CPG companies. And I said, well, of course we do that too, which we had just started to kind of do. And he said, we've given up on Nielsen, who was the big player in the space. Can you be in New York on Monday? And I said, absolutely. And so I flew into New York, met with a group of about 10 Facebook people, figured out what they wanted, agreed to do it. I still hadn't told anyone on the team what I was doing, by the way. So I kind of went out on a little bit of a limb, said, yes, we will deliver this. we'll deliver it by Christmas so that it's ready by the time you go public next year. And the rest kind of was history for us. So we became Facebook's most important partner, and really helped them with their IPO and then following the IPO. And so that's the third chapter, was the kind of Facebook explosion. And that led to Twitter and Snapchat and Pinterest and everybody else working with us as they went public as well. And then that's the end of that chapter. And then I'll tell you the last chapter, and then I'm happy to answer any questions you have. The final chapter was we had venture investors, and so it was time to get them an exit. We were about 5 years into the Datalogics portion of the journey post Next Action, and we're in mid 2014, and we decided to file to go public. We said, this can be a public company now, so we filed confidentially to go public, and then in the summer, I think it was the summer, it may have been the fall. An article came out in high profile articles quoted in both New York Times and the Wall Street Journal. Datalogics has filed to go public, and here's their banking syndicate. So they definitely had inside information, although everyone was sworn to secrecy on the banks and the board, but someone leaked it. And guess what happens when you leak something like that? The phone starts ringing off the hook with people saying, well, we actually want to acquire you. And so we met as a board and said, what should we do? And I had frankly never had aspirations to be a public company CEO. That wasn't something on my punch list. It is for some people, but it wasn't on my bucket list. And so we said, well, why don't we entertain both in parallel paths? So we started to talk to folks who knew us well already. We didn't really go out to anyone new. And we're very fortunate to have 5 offers on the company, and we ended up selling the company to Oracle. And we announced it in December and closed it in January of 2015. And so that was the final chapter. And that's always called the exit by investors. But I think what I encourage entrepreneurs to think about is that's a liquidity event. It's not necessarily an exit for the leader. It's certainly not an exit for the employees. And so it really, I think it does it a disservice when that's viewed as the end, because you have to actually do planning around, well, how's this going to work? And one of the amazing things in this chapter for us is we ended up quadrupling the size of the business again in the next 4 years as part of Oracle. So I ended up staying 4.5 years at Oracle. We then became the Oracle Data Cloud and continued to grow the business before leaving a couple of years ago.
So that's a lot happening in that relatively short window of time when you think about it. What were you thinking and feeling throughout the process? What was your stress level like? How are you looking at your life throughout it? I think that your personal journey and your professional journey, everything merges when you're under a lot of stress with those kind of big decisions.
Yeah. Well, I was fortunate with the big decision about the sale or going public that my investors were completely supportive. They were 100% supportive of whatever path we chose to take. And in fact, one of them, Sandy Miller at IVP, took me out to dinner, and we had never had one-on-one dinner before, kind of the day before the board meeting to make the final decision. He said, Eric, I want you to know that however you vote, I will vote with you. In other words, I don't really care what the other board members do. If you tell me you want to keep rolling with this business, we will keep rolling with the business. And I actually teared up at that time. This is, these guys are old pros. The IVP's taken like 130 companies public. This is like my one shot. And so I teared up I thought he was just such a mensch for saying that. And I said, Sandy, I really appreciate that. Means the world to me. I think this is the right answer. I think it's time. So I think having, feeling like you're supported internally just makes a big difference. That I think a lot of times, the whole dynamic with boards is really interesting, right? Because at the end of the day, if they can be thought of as a supportive group of friends, frankly, and mentors, rather than disciplinarians, rather than someone to be feared, it really makes a big difference in the dynamic when they're in the foxhole with you.
Yeah, well, I also think that at that time of a big milestone, you were pretty affirmed as a leader that somebody would reach out to you and actually share that they trusted your judgment and what you were looking for to support you. So, kudos to you. What were your team members saying once those decisions were public? What kind of reaction did you get? And How did that impact your leadership?
Well, it's interesting. I think when you have a big change, selling the company or raising a round or downsizing or you merging, you name it, I think the question behind every question is, how's this going to impact me? Right? Everyone is thinking that way. And, interestingly, that's true for investors. Interestingly, that's true for you as the protagonist. Interestingly, that's true for the most junior person at the company. Everyone wants, no matter what they say, their first question is, how's this going to impact my job and day to day? How's this going to impact me financially? And then, and then tell me about other people as well. That's what I think everyone would say if they were actually being completely open and telling the truth, right? So I think everyone needed to be reassured that it was very daunting. Oracle's culture has a certain reputation, and Oracle's obviously a massive software company that's been around for many, been around for forever, for longer than most of the people on this call on the Zoom have been alive. And so it was daunting to sell into a company that big with $40 billion in revenue, where we were, at the time we sold, we were 125 million in revenue, right? It wasn't I showed a pie chart, try to draw a pie wedge that's 125 million out of 40 billion. You can't actually see it. That was kind of my joke. Is we think we're big stuff in the advertising world, or we sold for a lot of money, but we literally aren't even material to these guys. And when Oracle bought the company, I did not meet Larry Ellison or the co-CEOs, just to give you a sense, until after we sold the company. So
yeah, that's interesting.
Oracle paid over $1 billion for the company and never met me at that level. It just delegated down. The company's so big and there's so many decision layers. And so they were involved in the decision, but they didn't feel a need to meet me. They never came on site to see what our office was like. It was fascinating.
So did your stress level go up or down after the sale?
It went different.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's a good answer. Different is good.
Yeah, different sources of stress. I think in the new world order, I lost my moorings a bit. And I think this is very common when you sell your company. You're not the CEO anymore, and you're used to a certain dynamic, good or bad or indifferent, with the board, for example, and with your team. And now, and you're always, as a private company CEO, you're always, especially if you've raised money, you're always trying to think about, how do we make the company more valuable? How do we make the company more valuable? How do we grow it? As part of Oracle, I wasn't clear what the guiding principle or North Star was anymore. Right? No, and there was no playbook, and they didn't say, Eric, we want you to triple this business or work on this part and not on this part. And so I really tried with the guy who was my first boss, I really tried to get clarity around, how are we going to be measured? What does success look like? Is it revenue? Is it gross margin? Is it EBITDA? Like, what really matters? Is it revenue growth at all costs? And I couldn't really get answers to that question because they weren't used to having P&Ls run by people.
Mm-hmm.
But so I had to figure it out. And I always tell people it's so important to really figure out who your stakeholders are. And here it was Oracle's shareholders, and maybe Larry Ellison, because he kind of does his own thing too, and try to figure out what they want from you. They may not tell you, they may not know, or they may not want to tell you, but it's your job to figure it out. And what I realized is we needed to drive revenue more than anything else, because at the end of the day, Oracle is such a big company with a lot of really mature businesses, and we were tiny in that. So what really didn't matter was our EBITDA or our revenue. I mean, these guys have $12 billion in EBITDA, right? No chance we were near break even. No chance we're ever going to inflect that, even if we 10x'd our EBITDA. However, if we looked at their cloud revenue growth, now we were starting to get meaningful, because if we could add 50 million in cloud revenue growth in those days, and ultimately, a couple hundred million, including by acquisitions, now we were positively impacting Oracle's share price. So that was the clarity of, like, it's cloud revenue growth that matters the most. And even if the accounting team beats us up for not hitting the bottom line, the people who really care are going to care the most about the revenue growth. So that's what we focused on.
Yeah. So amidst all the different ways you could have gone, you had to pick the direction and take it there. And I think that's something that you are known for from a leadership perspective, figuring out the path and moving it. And you've made a big move. at a very interesting time with CrossFit. I think that your story about buying CrossFit, taking on the leadership role, taking the helm, is fascinating for a number of reasons, not to mention the time period in which you did it with everything CrossFit was facing. Is pretty powerful. They needed the right leader, somebody that had passion, but also knew how to handle the situation. So maybe we can transition to this next step and talk a little bit about, hey, how did Eric Roza end up owning CrossFit and being the CEO?
Yeah. Well, the story, it's funny, there are both short and long versions of this. The short version of the story is the longest time-wise. So the way it happened is 12 years ago, Eric Roza started CrossFit, fell in love with it, saw the life-changing benefits it had on himself and on his friends. And within 2 years told a bunch of his friends, if I could do anything one day, I would buy CrossFit and lead it into the future. So that's the short version of that, 12 years in the making. The longer, kind of probably more interesting version is last June, CrossFit got into some real controversy on social media, and with allegations of sexism and racism levied at the founder. And the company had just been through the ringer with COVID as well. And the founder was the CEO and sole owner of the company and did not have a board of directors. We just talked about board dynamics. He really didn't have any board to consult, and he didn't have any investors to consult. And he had stated long before that he would never sell the company. And so I had stated long before that that was a dream of mine when I was done with the digital advertising world by the company. And those two visions kind of I guess collided at some point when this challenging situation occurred last June. And so through a friend, I reached out to him and asked if we could get together and talk about the future of CrossFit, and found myself in his dining room in Montecito, California the next day. And this was within about a week of the infamous, for those who followed this, the Floyd 19 tweet that he sent out, which kind of rattled everybody. He was in the middle of the George Floyd stuff, and he was somehow creating some weird merging of COVID-19 and George Floyd in a way that none of us could possibly understand, but was deemed certainly insensitive and racist, but not that anyone, including me, knows what he was talking about. And so I got together with him and said, look, I think the company is going to be better served with a different leader going forward. And I'm not here to judge you or comment on this situation. I just think that, people might feel more comfortable with a different leader now. And I'd love the chance to give it a go. And I care a lot about CrossFit and its future. And that's what's motivating this for me. I've already had my, business success with Datalogics, and I'm not trying to one up that business success. What I'm really trying to do is move into an area of passion for myself. So that's kind of.
And how was that received? I mean, what was the first reaction back? Because, when a company is in crisis, which of course they were, and you have a founder, CEO, so things are personal in fairness, right?
Yeah.
What was the initial reaction from CrossFit about your, proposal to start to talk about it?
The initial reaction was avoidance, I think. So there was almost like filibustering going on. We were in his dining room for 9 hours, and he was holding forth on a wide range of topics, and it was very challenging for me to try to bring the conversation back to the topic at hand. And I'm not, as you know, Tami, I'm not someone who's at a loss for words typically. And it was really hard for me to get a word in edgewise.
9 hours is a really long time, just for the record. But
I couldn't get a word in. I couldn't get a word in edgewise. And he was much more interested in talking about topic. He's a brilliant guy. He's a brilliant and visionary guy. And he was much more interested in talking about human physiology and anatomy and nutrition, and also how he had been wronged in all this. He was very much feeling like a victim of what went on, and not as interested in talking about, well, what does this mean, and so on. So what happened was I went back to my hotel room that night after meeting with him. It was about 11, And I just shook my head and said, like, this isn't going to happen. I'm not even going to get a chance to really make my pitch. I woke up the next morning, woke up early, beautiful breeze on the Santa Barbara coast. Got to give you the image here. I'm out on the porch, meditated a little bit, started journaling, and just wrote down a handful of things in the journal and said, this is the message you need to get to him. You need to tell him, you need to show him that your vision is aligned with his. That what you want to do, even though you'll do it in very different ways, is what he wants to do, which is continue to build CrossFit into this incredible force for good. 1. 2 is you have to show him, you have to convince him that you can get him the money he's looking for and take care of he's very focused on taking care of his wife and kids, his wife's a lot younger than him and so on, and he's 65. And 3, you need to help give him a vision of what he might do in the future once he moves on, because everyone needs to have some meaning in their life. And so that's what we did. So we focused on that. He allowed, I basically asked for the microphone, and he allowed me to talk. And by the next morning, we had a handshake deal.
It's interesting that you took that time to meditate and reflect. Do you journal a lot?
I would say, I'm glad you didn't ask to meditate a lot, because that answer is different, not too much meditating, but I do try to journal a lot. I find it very helpful to do so. I highly recommend it to anyone to try. And Tami, you know, I'll just a little aside here. I taught a class at CU last year and at the beginning of COVID, and all the students, it was an entrepreneurial leadership class in the engineering school, but I had all the students keep journals. It was kind of mandatory that they keep a weekly journal. But did you know that there are 3 different ways of journaling that are from a medium standpoint that all have a very different impact? One is to have a book and handwrite into it. Another one is to type into a document on the computer, and literally the way you interact with the journal impacts. If you try this, like if you tried today when you go home, if everyone listening tries this when they go home, try to handwrite for 5 or 10 minutes, then whatever topic you're interested in, go back and then type about it. And then the third one is an audio journal. And that one, I just use voice memo on the iPhone. And you'll find you get radically different information out of your system and from your subconscious. So actually the medium that you're using to express, whether it's a pen, and I have horrible handwriting, or whether it's typing, or whether it's speaking, dramatically impacts what comes out. And so it's not that one is preferential to the other. They each have benefits, but I had all students experiment with all 3 and then stick with the one that was the most impactful for them.
So what's most impactful for you of those 3?
You know, I tend to do a lot of handwriting, journaling, a bit of voice journaling. Voice journaling is really good when you're driving by yourself, I found. Sometimes I'll do it when I'm walking or lying in bed. Usually that's a fun one to do kind of on a road trip or something. You're driving in the car by yourself. You know, we've all got our battery of podcasts and music and people we talk to on those things, but sometimes taking a 10-minute break and voice journaling is really impactful too. And then I type some too. My other rule for journaling, if we want to stay on this, is I don't believe in linearity of journaling. Like sometimes maybe that's called for. I actually like the idea that you just let it free flow. You come in wherever you want to and go to wherever you're going to go. And don't judge it. So you might end up thinking, I've got to sort things out with my partner. And we just had an argument and I got to think about that. And then before you know it, you're writing about this flower that's growing outside the window you're staring at, or you're remembering something about your childhood and a fight you got in then, or whatever it is. So that's my other big rule is let it flow and don't judge it. The other big thing is the important reminder that what you write down or type or speak out loud never needs to be referenced again. You never need to share it with anybody again. You never need to look at it again. And that's really freeing too. So you don't have to like worry about editing. How is my writing doing? Did I say this eloquently enough? Sometimes it's really, my dad was a literature professor. Sometimes it's really fun to come up with a great turn of phrase, but that's not the goal. The goal is just to write.
Well, I appreciate a good journaler. I have a journal for every year of my life since I was 6 years
Wow.
old,
What
pretty
is
religiously. And
your rules about journaling?
well, I think they're very similar in nature to what you're saying.
You sound much more organized and structured than I am.
Well, I let it free flow, but I will say this. I do think that journaling reminds you that although you change and evolve as a human, you are still the same person at the core. The things that make you stressed or that make you excited or the kind of people that you're attracted to in your life, friends or partners, it doesn't change. It just evolves more, or you understand it better. But I would venture to guess that many of us at some level are the same people we were when we were 6 or 7, although greatly evolved in fairness, but just a little perspective. I appreciate you sharing that with our participants, because I do think those kind of tools help everybody navigate their own lives and their own entrepreneurial journeys. But you got to CrossFit. What did you find when you got there?
Well, I found a group of about 100 people who were great, who worked for the company, a pretty small group, much smaller than people might think. I found a group of nearly 12,000 gym owners, many of whom had decided that CrossFit didn't have a place in their lives anymore because they couldn't reconcile what CrossFit meant to them every day in the gyms they owned and what they had read on social media. What I didn't mention was several articles came out after the initial tweet response that talked about CrossFit having a toxic culture of sexism and so on. So that was kind of a pylon on top of it. And there was some indications that had been going on for some time. And again, I'm not going to put my own opinion into this. I think what was out there. And so a lot of the gym owners just felt like we can't be part of this anymore. And I found the same things with the athletes, with the professional athletes who do CrossFit, who were saying, we're going to boycott the CrossFit Games. We can't be part of this anymore. And the CrossFit Games are a big annual athletic competition. So I found a lot of strife and uncertainty in there. And so I kind of chose to dive right into the middle of it. And I just, I went out and spoke with folks, made calls, and met as many people as possible and just listened and tried to develop a vision for the future that was inclusive, that recognized what we all had in common was this full kind of unmitigated belief in CrossFit's transformatory power. And we knew CrossFit was transformational. We couldn't condone or reconcile what we were reading with what was happening in the gym every day, where CrossFit is incredibly inclusive and it doesn't care what your gender orientation or preference is, or what your race is, or what your income demographic is, or what your education level is, or what your age is. Any of these is, the great statement that you guys had on DEI at the beginning of this just reminded me of, kind of the way we thought about it. We built onto it with age level and demographics and education, everything was, none of this matters. Culture, because we're in 150 different countries. All that matters is that you're committed to working on and improving yourself every day. And then the magic happens. And so because we had that in common, we had this ability to recognize our common humanity, to honor our differences, and to move into the future together. So that's kind of what we did.
You found a team that cared deeply about CrossFit, that was working there. They'd been through a bit of a roller coaster ride. Now they have a new CEO coming in, who they need to get to know and understand your vision. Is there one lesson that you learned from your process of transitioning into that role that you're really proud of in terms of how you did it? And then one that you think, well, now knowing what I know, I might have done that a little bit differently.
Let me think about that. So I think one thing that I feel like we did well was the community reach outs. So we really tried to reach out to a lot of people in the community. The other thing that I think has gone well is we were able to integrate a bunch of new talent with some really great existing talent as well. And those groups are doing well together, and that's challenging. The merging of cultures can be very challenging, and a lot of people school senior with CrossFit had been there over 10 years. And now you've got new people coming in who in a number of cases haven't even done CrossFit before. So I think that stuff, I actually think we did pretty well. I think, or think we got lucky on, whatever, it worked out well. I think things that could have done better, I think is kind of a learning, I guess, is maybe being clearer about setting expectations and checking in more to make sure that people are tracking and pacing along. I spent more time externally than internally certainly the first 60 days. I mean, that's completely changed now. And, the community was so big outside of CrossFit and they feel such ownership over it. And there were 12,000 gyms and millions of athletes and so on. And so, that was the place where I elected to spend my time, but there was a lot of time needed internally as well. And so I think if I had to do it over, I would have spent more time internally. We also had on top of everything else, we had the challenge of COVID.
Yeah. Well, that's good guidance. I mean, in terms of the internal outreach, I think that those on the call that are starting and growing companies, it's a good reminder that you're only as strong as your team and where they're at in the process as well. In terms of now that, you've settled into this role and you're looking at your vision for the future, what are you thinking? What's it going to look like going forward?
Well, I think that we have a lot of opportunity both to grow the number of gyms, to grow the amount of things that we do for the gyms, that they, added value we can create for them. And we've tried to develop a bit of that already. To grow the opportunities to make our coaches better. We have over 100,000 coaches around the world. And so they look to us for continuing education and continuous development of their talents. And then most importantly, to the millions of CrossFitters around the world, current and future CrossFitters, and even past CrossFitters who we want to win back. What is our unique value proposition for them? And what does CrossFit mean that you just can't get anywhere else?
Well, I'm excited for the future of CrossFit. I believe that the value system that was set up and where you're taking it is pretty powerful. And I do think that the more we can focus on the health and wellness of ourselves and those with whom we work, friends and family, the stronger we actually are all together. So that's exciting. We have some questions. I'm going to move to that now and they're coming in live. Eric from Alex K. Relatively new to leading CrossFit, what else is on your entrepreneurial bucket list?
Oh, entrepreneurial bucket list. I don't know if I've got anything else on my entrepreneurial bucket list.
Well, you have a lot on your plate right now. So
I have to say, I don't have a good answer.
This was your dream.
Yeah.
From Samantha D, when you're at the level of leadership where you find yourself now, it's easy to assume that you've got it all figured out. What's a skill area of expertise that you are personally working on?
I'm always working to be a better listener. I tend to move pretty quickly and have people, running to catch up. I like fast conversation and so on. And I'm increasingly, I think, learning that people process information in different ways. And some people are post-processors, right? Where they want to go away, take it and come back with it. So I'm trying to learn to, adapt my pace more to the folks I'm with. And hopefully I'm making modest improvements in that.
Are the post-processors, you think quickly and you move quickly. Are those the harder ones to get used to?
Yeah, I think that's I think it's a challenge for both parties when the processing speeds are different. And it's the same with kids. I have at least one of my kids processes much more slowly and in a different way. And so, getting that communication cadence down so that we're building trust and not frustrating each other and building self-confidence and so on it's a learning opportunity for that.
Yeah, I do find that learning to really be a good listener is most challenging when those that don't process information the same way that you do. But it's great to have processors around you if you're moving fast because they put the brakes on appropriately when you need them. Josh S. Has asked, who has mentored you along the way? Can you talk about how an aspiring entrepreneur can find mentorship and use it to their full advantage?
Well, I think I've not been as good as other people I know at finding mentors along the path. I want to be totally honest about that. I've been fortunate to be asked to mentor others and have really enjoyed that, and have been really kind of envious of the maturity and self-confidence that goes into asking someone to be your mentor. And I think the world's gotten better about that too. I think you know, folks beginning their careers now, it's more of an obvious thing that, hey, you're going to need to find mentors to do this. You're going to need mentors. There wasn't as much talk about that when I was on my way up, and I don't think I yet had the self-confidence and vulnerability to raise my hand. I remember starting my career in management consulting. I remember I had one guy who was kind of a mentor, but specifically in very quantitative stuff. He had a math mind and I had a math mind, but not at no level comparable to his. And so I thought of him as kind of a mentor in that way. But I didn't necessarily seek out mentors the way a lot of people do. So I think this is it's a really good question to come up, because I think you need to do the work to seek out mentors. And the thing to remember is anyone that you would want to mentor you is not going to say no to the question. If they do, they're not the person you wanted anyway, because it is a reciprocal exchange. The mentor gets every bit as much out of it as the mentee does. And I just see that time and again.
This is interesting too. I imagine there's a lot more informal mentorship that occurs. And I do think sometimes we attempt to formalize it so much that it loses its authenticness in relationship building. So there's something in the middle of what it means to find a great mentor and really leverage that person.
I agree. Yeah.
Okay, last question coming in, and then I'm going to turn it to you after that for any closing comments, closing advice, closing inspiration. But this comes in from Sean O'Donnell. What are some of the strategic initiatives to engage and capture new members of the CrossFit community? And how does one go about joining you on that mission? That comes with a great happy emoji. So are you looking to build your team, and how does somebody find a way to be part of it?
We are still looking for select team members. We went through a really rapid growth phase this year, so we're slowing down a bit, but we'll still be looking for new team members. And the LinkedIn has the postings for roles we're going to be seeking. You know what? Let me just get the first part of that. I can see it on the Q&A too. What are some of the strategic initiatives to capture and engage? Well, I think CrossFit is fundamentally a referral business. That's the way most people find us, is through a friend or family member. And so two things is one is to kind of make the brand more approachable to people who are not who maybe don't come in through a friend or family member, right? So that they read about CrossFit and I want to do this, versus say, ooh, that looks scary, or I'm intimidated, or whatever, right? We don't want that. We want people to say, oh, well, there's a story of this 100-year-old woman, Francine, who does CrossFit. I can do that, right? That's what we're looking for. So one is to make the brand more approachable, and two is to have our members ever more excited about what's happening for them, so that they're more and more motivated to get their friends and family members into the gym. So build more on the referral model and start to connect more and more directly to consumers.
Well, it's really exciting where you're taking it. And it's even more exciting the fact that you sort of put it out to the universe so many years ago that would be something that you'd want to do. And here you are. So it's a great example of, if we have a big idea or a big dream, putting the stake in the ground, that somehow we may land right where we want to. So congrats on that.
Thank you.
Well deserved. Any last advice or final comments you want to throw out to Denver Startup Week?
No, I don't have anything beyond just saying thank you for the opportunity. I've been thrilled to be part of the Colorado startup scene since its early days in the 2000s, and it's unbelievable how far things have come since then. And Denver's become unquestionably one of the hubs in the world for startups, and And it's a tribute to everybody involved in this, from the attendees to the organizers and so on, and to you, Tami, for putting on this incredible event.
Well, thanks, Eric. Thanks for spending time with us.
Sure.
It's a great story. You've been a huge part of this ecosystem for so long. It's really fun to see you living out another part of your dream on your entrepreneurial journey, but also just doing great things with CrossFit, that community as well. So thank you. Thanks everybody for participating, and we look forward to seeing you throughout the rest of Denver Startup Week. Thanks, Eric.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.